Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. That's so much better. Thanks so much for being here this afternoon with us. We have a fantastic event designed for you. I want to just take a few moments to welcome our special guests from Francis Lewis High School who are here with us today, so thank you for being with us, and our many classes here at the college who are participating in the Common Read. This is the third and final week of events. It's been very busy. We've offered 35 student events and 4 faculty events. We're in the home stretch, and if you haven't attended any events to date, or if this is your first one, know that we have more scheduled, one this afternoon and several more tomorrow and the following day. It's been very exciting. I want to just take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Susan Madera. I'm the director of the Common Read Initiative here at the college, and working very closely with me is my very good friend, Dr. Jean Murley, who's from the English department, and she's the coordinator of the Common Read. So I'd like to introduce her right now, and come on over.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jean Murley, and I teach here in the English department at Queensborough. I recognize some of you from other events. That's wonderful. And I know that we all have been reading the book Picking Cotton, right? And we all love it, right? It's a great book. It's a wonderful book. It's about some very, very, very crucial social justice issues, namely wrongful conviction. It's about the power of forgiveness, and it narrates the story of an exoneree and a crime victim. And so today we have a very special guest for you. As Susan said, we've designed these events to support your reading of Picking Cotton. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our guest, and then he's gonna come up. But the first thing I want to say is, please sign the sign-in sheets. There are several going around. Susan has them up there. If you don't sign the sign-in sheet, you don't get credit for being here. So make sure you put your name and your professor's name. Very, very important. Thank you for doing that. The other sort of housekeeping thing is we are not allowed to eat or drink in this room, unfortunately, because of the upholstery. So please be mindful, no eating or drinking here. I think that's it. We have other events scheduled for this afternoon. We have a movie that we're showing about exonerees, and we have events both tomorrow and Friday. So keep on reading, keep on talking about what you are learning, and keep learning about wrongful conviction. There's a lot to it. It's a very complicated issue, and it's very important. You know, as citizens, you guys, many of you, most of you, will be called to serve on a jury one day. You may get called to serve as a juror for a criminal trial. Who knows? Many of you I know are entering the criminal justice field. It's very important that you have a balanced view, an objective view of both the positive elements of our criminal justice system and the elements that don't work, that are flawed. Criminal justice is a human endeavor, and as such, it is subject to human error. So we've been learning about a type of error called wrongful conviction, and I just want to introduce now Mr. Fernando Bermudez. He spent 18 and a half years in New York State prisons serving time for a murder that he did not commit. Just let that sink in for a minute. Some of you are 18 years old, right? How many of you are 18? Yeah, some of you are 18. So for your lifetime, Fernando was in prison for a crime that he did not commit. He's going to tell you all about that. I will just tell you very briefly that Fernando has been free, fully exonerated, declared factually innocent since 2009. He travels the world speaking to audiences such as yourself about his experiences, and he's a very strong advocate, a very strong voice for the voiceless, the wrongfully convicted. So he's going to share his experiences with you now. So please help me welcome Mr. Fernando Bermudez.
Thank you everyone for coming out today to Queensborough Community College. It's a pleasure to see all of you. We welcome your attendance and we appreciate your attention. A pencil has an eraser because it represents human acknowledgement of mistakes. However, acknowledgements of mistakes in criminal justice can mean the difference between life and death, freedom and loss of liberty, and one's pursuit of happiness. So what do over 1,736 documented cases of wrongful convictions that cannot be erased tell us about our American criminal justice system today? What does this mean amid America's problem of mass incarceration, in which an estimated 2.3 million people are wrongfully, 2.3 million people incarcerated, with experts stating that at least 1 to 5% of that 2.3 million population is innocent? What does this problem mean if, since 1989, when this problem has begun getting documented, there are more undocumented cases, and that only 10% of all wrongful conviction cases can be resolved through DNA, leaving the non-DNA cases like myself fighting for their lives, when that sort of technology cannot prove their innocence? What does it mean when the innocent in prison are also placed there not by mistakes, but by the purposeful and willful misconduct of our police and prosecutors, who have been entrusted to protect and serve us against violence and against injustice? What does it mean for the public confidence of America when an innocent person is incarcerated and the guilty go unpunished, leaving the guilty capable of committing more crimes, such as it happens in many other cases? The common read that you're reading today, that you have read, I would hope, Picking Cotton, deals with the story of Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton. Jennifer Thompson, as you know, wrongfully identified Ronald Cotton as her perpetrator after she was raped. And it turns out that all along, someone else named Bobby Poole had actually committed the crime. At the heart of that story is not only forgiveness, yes, but it is also the problem highlighted by mistaken eyewitness identification, which is the leading reason why wrongfully convicted people end up in prison and why they have to fight for their lives. By extension, my case began through that same problem of mistaken eyewitness identification. On August 6, 1991, while I'm living in Washington Heights, New York City with my parents. My life seemed full of promise back then. I was set to enter the medical profession to atone for some mistakes I had made in my life at the age of 22, to make my parents proud, to contribute to society, because I had been frustrated as well by not being able to get a job, and I felt that a career path in the medical profession would finally give me a better chance at seeking steady employment. But my hopes and dreams at that point were dashed when I'm arrested at gunpoint by New York City detectives. And I'm charged with murder. Hours would pass in a police precinct before
I knew about what I was being charged with. I had alibi witnesses who came forward to the precinct and all attested to the fact that we were all together and under no circumstances were we involved in any violence whatsoever. I wasn't believed, despite 10 hours of interrogation, despite the fact that all our stories connected together and my friends had not even known what I was being charged with. I believed in the American criminal justice system at that point. Having gone to private school all my life, having believed the mystical optimism of my immigrant parents who came from the Dominican Republic in search of a better life for myself and my 4 other siblings. I believed in that. I believed that the truth would prevail as I sat in that precinct. I believed that if I told the truth, that justice would prevail. I lived in Washington Heights, where the mystical optimism of many Dominican families was tempered by the fast money-making allure of people selling drugs in hopes of making it out of the inner city where I lived in. And yet, my dream was shattered because even though I told the truth, I was sent to Rikers Island, where now I had to fend for myself, where I would endure physical attacks, where I would now have to fight for my very life, in hoping that the American criminal justice system would work as I waited for my trial. I didn't know at that point, or at the precinct, that the witnesses had their own story to tell. And that story involved around them being near NYU on August 3rd and 4th, 1991. And Ephraim Lopez, 16, having absconded from a work release program, having been punched in the face inside a nightclub. He sought revenge and called his friends from his West 90s neighborhood. Evidence would demonstrate. And these friends came and attacked the kid who punched him. Some kid from Queens, actually. On the corner near NYU, when this fight broke out under nighttime conditions, which made mistaken eyewitness identification more of a possibility, Ephraim Lopez had pointed out Raymond Blount to his friends. And out of the confused fight that broke out, in which bottles were thrown, fists connected with people who were Raymond Blount after Raymond Blount himself had punched Lopez earlier that night in the nightclub, a shot rang out and it killed Raymond Blount. 3 friends of the deceased rushed Raymond Blount to the hospital where he's pronounced dead. And in that process, the police just gathered the teenage witnesses who were there and took them to a precinct. They had been attacked, they were hungry, they were hurting, they were sleepy. They didn't want to be there by their own accounts. But they were in the police precinct after this happened to them, and in one sense, they did want justice for their friend, their acquaintance who they met that night. The 3 friends of the deceased, however, would choose Ephraim Lopez correctly out of a mugshot identification picture. They picked him, and they said, this is the guy over whom this altercation began. And they were in a room with the other teenage witnesses. Once they picked out Ephraim Lopez, they were taken out the room. And the other teenage witnesses were allowed to discuss other photographs that were being selected. A 17-year-old young lady picked out my picture after picking out 3 people who she said resembled the shooter. And illegally, she shared my picture with the other teenage witnesses, thereby creating a psychological interplay, a reinforcement process, if you will, in which when one person said I looked familiar, the other person said that as well, but then they settled on that I could be the shooter, even though they were not sure. Once this happened, my life, I would learn, would take a turn for the worse. Because thereafter, the police were focused on my picture and introduced it and showed it and shared it and discussed it with all the other witnesses. Ephraim Lopez, however, not knowing this process had occurred, had actually told the police and prosecutor who the real perpetrator was, described as someone as named Wu Lu from his West 90s neighborhood, who came to his rescue that night, admittedly, he said, after he had been punched and was embarrassed and wanted revenge. And he told them in a videotaped statement on August 5th, 1991. But the police and prosecutor, able to, at that very moment, ladies and gentlemen, to stop the illegal identification procedure from making my situation worse, chose instead not to investigate these key leads coming from Ephraim Lopez. They could have very well have gone to the 90s neighborhood and found this guy where he was living, but they didn't. Instead, they focused on the picture and the illegal identification procedure which occurred and took my picture and showed it to Ephraim Lopez, placed it in front of him and said, all right, all that other stuff you're telling us, isn't this the guy? Ephraim Lopez looks up in the video, bewildered, and you could see it in his face. He has this Scooby-Doo look in which he doesn't know what they're trying to get at. He's like, huh? And he realizes then that there's an opportunity for him to get out of prison because he had been interrogated for over 20 hours and not free to leave a police precinct. 16, facing murder charges. And so he says, yeah, that's Wulu right there. He takes the picture, the police run with it, and now I'm at Rikers Island, as I told you. And I don't know any of this as I'm preparing for my trial. All I know, I have to survive at Rikers Island while I'm waiting for the American criminal justice system to work. And I'm fighting for my life. I'm trying to keep my sanity in a place where I know I don't belong, thinking that if I'm patient, justice will prevail. I don't know that right before my trial begins, some of these teenage witnesses are offered plea deals in which, in exchange for their own unrelated criminal cases, those charges are dropped if they testify against me. I don't know any of this. Nor do I know that Ephraim Lopez had done the same to get out of prison and not be charged in accessory to murder if he picked me. All I know is my truth. I take the stand and say it. My alibi witnesses come forward. And 3 friends of the deceased said that I'm not the one who shot their best friend. In particular, because they said that I was too tall and big compared to what the perpetrator was described as by witnesses and 9/11 police reports. Namely, 5'10", 165 pounds versus my 6'2", then 220-pound stature. Masked, hidden, because I'm forced to sit down in a lineup, which today should not be done, because it influences witnesses not to make the correct identification. Not surprisingly, I'm convicted. And a resounding pound of the gavel, I'm sentenced to life in prison. Shipped upstate. I'm given a green uniform. And my number becomes 928325. That's what I'm known as. At the age of 23, when I'm upstate, that's how I'm called. That's what prison I'm transferred to next. That's where I'm told to go eat. When I see my family who has to drive 6 hours to upstate maximum security prisons. And it's a horrible existence. It's a horrible existence. When your life is taken from you, and your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is no longer possible, except if you fight, except if you get out of prison. When I arrive upstate, I start realizing that because I'm indigent, that is, because I don't have a lawyer, I need to find one because my parents, now in debt from having paid a private attorney, which didn't work, now means that I have to find another attorney. So I begin writing letters, and I begin trying to reach out, and I begin educating myself, reading book after book, trying to learn law. And a lawyer answers my cry. She became a lawyer in her late 40s after being imprisoned in Russia. And she vowed that if she ever got out of her problem for teaching Christianity in Russia, that she would become a lawyer. In her late 40s, I became her first case. And she came to my rescue. Her name was Marianne DeBarry. By 1993, Marianne DeBarry, 5 feet tall, blonde, the energy of a hummingbird, and the voice as if someone swallowed helium, came to my rescue. And she had these high heels that would clack and clack as she came to visit me and circulated the table, showing me all the evidence with the excitement that she had, telling me that the indictment was not worth the paper it was printed on. And she began investigating. She began doing what the police and prosecutor, by now at my trial, had acknowledged not doing: investigating. And she found all these teenage witnesses who said that they purposely sent me to prison to get out of prison themselves, or that they were, in fact, mistaken and just went along with everyone else because I resembled the shooter because I was Latino. And all these witnesses came forward. And for me, it was a dawning of a new day, because the same judge who sentenced me, I now felt, would now be receptive to hearing the evidence and order a new trial, because my case only rested upon identification testimony. There was no physical or forensic evidence linking me to this crime. Just these witnesses who got up on the stand and lied. But the judge didn't care. He scoffed at Marianne DeBarry and laughed her out of her courtroom, as if she was someone telling this emperor, the judge, that he had no clothes. And so began my legal odyssey in a criminal justice system, flawed due to mistaken eyewitness identification, prosecutorial misconduct, and police misconduct, which, by all accounts, had already resulted in the arrest of another innocent man by the same precinct, who would later get exonerated, but before me. And now I had to survive in prison, because I was losing appeal after appeal. Each prisoner counts their hopes on winning an appeal. It's like a lottery in which you put the arguments forward and you hope, you pray that your case will be heard by a court and that will reverse the circumstances which you find yourself in. But the odds are so infinitesimally small to get justice on appeal. But I felt I could because I had the truth on my side. And that didn't work. Year after year would begin ticking by in prison. 1993, 94, 95, 96, 97. And each day felt not like 24 hours, but like 48, because time in prison drags. It goes slow. You feel lost unless you try to find yourself in some meaningful way, because you're surrounded by violence. There's people cutting and stabbing each other. There's people hanging up because they can't take it anymore, being let out on stretchers because it's their end. It's their last stop. There's the brutality of correctional officers amid the good ones that do indeed exist. And there's your own mind which seeks to become your enemy, not your best friend. And you have to fight against that. And I fought against it by doing the best I could through education. Once I had Marianne DeBarry, and even though she didn't win, I knew I had a fight on my hands. And that's because also I had people that I had to live for, not including my parents, not just them, not just my parents who were suffering and were in debt as a result, but for now, my wife and children. Because in prison, I was able to find a wonderful woman who believed in me and married me while I was in prison. And she brought back the faith of God in my life. And she gave me these beautiful children, which made me want to live when I felt like dying. And so I was able to avail myself of a college degree in which a scholarship afforded me the opportunity to earn a business degree, which I translated and put into effect in real action. I began selling clothes in prison. I began buying clothing, say, for $5 and retailing it for $20. And it wouldn't just be money that would be exchanged through checks that inmates would send my wife, but more through detergent, soap, toothbrushes, toothpaste, deodorant, stamps and cigarettes, which I would accumulate in lump sum and give to my wife on a prison visit so that she can take it out and sell it at the bodega for some money to pay the bills. That was my way of staying sane, of making sense of my incongruous situation. But sell as many clothes as I could. That wasn't changing my circumstances of getting out of prison. By 2000, my next hope in prison to get out was to go to federal court because the state had denied me across the board. I lost every appeal in the state. So I had to go to federal court and fight my appeal. And it seemed like the dawning of a new day because for the first time, a judge ordered the witnesses all to come forward and to reveal the reasons why they lied against me under oath. I was like, wow, I can't wait to eat the sancocho. I smell it now. I got 10 years in prison and I got my chance to be free. So I walked in handcuffed, shackled, sat down, and all the witnesses came forward and revealed the reasons why they lied. By now, they were adults in professions, living their lives, some troubled, particularly Efraim Lopez. Efraim Lopez, who knew who committed this crime, as I said, who told the police and prosecutor, got on the stand and told the judge and the whole courtroom packed why he lied. And then he shuffled past me, clink, 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 and stopped at my defense table and said, "I'm so sorry what I did to you," and then was quickly led away. Then my defense attorney says, "What do you think about that, Fernando?" And I said, "I forgive him. I forgive him in the name of Jesus Christ. I forgive him," without saying it, in my heart. Because at that moment, it was a victory for me to release the anger and resentment that was welling inside me, like something rotten, like something that was defeating me every single day because I carried such a heavy burden in my life. It was driving me mad to have this resentment, this grudge, which was, I felt, rotting me inside. When I forgave Efraim Lopez, at that very moment, I felt like I had a little victory because I didn't let the grudge defeat me anymore. And letting go of that felt really good. And so I also thought that because I did that, spiritually speaking, that was just part of the reason why I was going to be free. But the years would tick by again. As I'm in the law library, as usual, practicing and learning the law, reading every book to stay on top of my case and to help my lawyers out. And then the decision comes in 2004, 4 years later, me hoping that the birth of my second daughter, Carissa, in 2001, a year right after when I had my proceedings, would not mean a difference. When I went to court in federal court, she was celebrating on that very day her first birthday. And I really felt that that was a good sign that the meeting coinciding with her birth on the heels of 9/11 and all the destruction that had occurred against our great country would now be significant and connected to my being released. But in 2004, I get the decision that the judge, even though he agreed that my illegal identification procedures were unconstitutional and should not have happened, even though the witnesses had all these grave inconsistencies with the prior trial testimony, he said that it wasn't enough. He instead chose to believe the black and white transcript of their lies under the federal law, which is complicated more than the state, and decided to keep my conviction intact. I came back from that decision, and I felt like a body without its skeleton. I was just walking around aimlessly in prison, just feeling like I was going to die in there. That's how I truly felt. And then I decided that I needed to fight. I decided that I needed to rise above my circumstances. I needed to rise and transcend above what was going on in my life and look at it all. Look at the problems, the depression, me having lost 10 appeals by then, and rise above it so I can get a better look. And so my problems can seem smaller. Because when we rise against and above our problems, they get smaller. You get a better look, just like you do if you go on a rooftop and things look smaller, and if you keep going. And that's how I had to look at my situation. I had to rise above and I had to go against the depression that I felt, the anger that I felt, the feeling split in three through resentment, bitterness, and anger that was festering in me again. And I had to take a leap of faith. I had to go against what I was being told and what I saw and believe that God could free me. And so I joined the choir at church, and I began singing psalms and hymns, and I began reading my Bible, and I began just holding on to the fact that I believed that if my situation was so peculiar, that surely there would be a peculiar outcome. That surely there was a higher calling that I too didn't even know it then. So I began writing again, and writing, and writing, and writing. Mind you, this is how out of touch with technology I was at that point. I was using a green and white screened computer at that time. One of those big computers that you'd laugh at if you even saw, if you even seen it. Because in prison, they're just tucked away with all this technology, this old technology, I should say. But I cranked out letters. I wrote people in different continents. I wrote letter after letter to state assemblymen and senators, anyone who would listen. And I started getting attention again. And my case got publicized on court TV for an hour, followed by MSNBC running another documentary, another story. And then the New York Times placing my case front page in 2007, which also helped to attract a new group of lawyers who said, we're going to work pro bono the way Mary Ann, the Barry, had been working. Mary Ann by now had gotten cancer. And even though it had been in remission, she was not able no longer to move around New York City the way she had been to investigate my case and to do whatever. So she just served as a consultant. And so I got this attorney from New Jersey, Seton Hall Law School, and she connected with law firms in Washington, D.C. and New York, all of whom began working free of charge. And this collaboration made the district attorney's office so nervous that they began investigating my case behind my back. What they did was they started taking the key leads that Ephraim Lopez had told them in 1991, and they were trying to match it to evidence that I could be this Wulu guy. Well, the fact is, as we already had demonstrated in our proceedings, this Wulu guy did exist. He fled the state in 1991, right after the murder, had changed his name, and had been arrested again for some other stuff. The district attorney's office confirmed all of this, and then confirmed that when they went to go check his alibi about where he had been on the night of August 3rd and 4th, that night, he says he was in Kentucky. No, he wasn't. Because the employment record showed that where he said he worked did not exist. And anyone who worked there did not recognize him. He had no tax information to prove that he worked there. And a number of other inconsistencies were demonstrated that this was the right guy all along. And so a new judge opens my case in 2008 and 2009. And for the first time in state court, this judge, Justice John Cataldo, opened up my case and called an evidentiary hearing. And the district attorney's office tried to stop it, but they could not. Instead, they asked for more time to investigate. And then when that time ran out, now they have the audacity to offer me a plea bargain. I'm in the prison yard running, because I'm a runner, and I'm running in prison. And the reason I run is to calm my nerves, because I'm a nervous wreck. Silently, I carry myself with respect and distinction, but inside I'm crumbling. My hands shake. I can't sleep. Suicide still pops in my head, even though I thought I overcame that problem in 1992 when I first came upstate. And I'm called by a correctional guard, and I meet my lawyers, and they say, Fernando, the district attorney's office wants to offer you a plea bargain. Plead guilty and offer plea form to this crime, and you can go free this week. I said, what? I had 18 years in prison at that point, and let me tell you, I wanted to go home so bad. I wanted to taste my wife's cooking, because through some strange phenomenon, she has all these compartments in her head, and all these recipes passed down through generations. Meatloaf, boop. Lobster sauce, boop. Spaghetti and meatballs, boop. And I wanted to taste all that good cooking. I wanted to be home with my children. I wanted to be a dad with them, and I wanted to run in the park with them. I wanted to be a human being again. I wanted to feel alive instead of feeling dead in a prison, in a 6-by-9-foot cell, where you sit in a small cell and you have a toilet, and the bed is right next to the toilet, and your cell is right there, and people just walk by, and you're like a caged animal in there. Even schools come in and watch you as part of a prison project understanding program. And they all walk and they just gawk at you. These little kids look at you. Of course, they're under correctional escort, but they all gawk at you. Wow, somebody in a cell, and you're just there embarrassed. So I wanted to leave prison. Hell yeah, I wanted to leave prison. But I couldn't leave by bending and crushing the principles upon which I first stood, which was to maintain my innocence, which was not to accept a plea bargain when it was offered in 1992 on my trial. I said, I'm not going to accept that. I'd rather die in prison for the truth, at the risk that if I saw a parole board, they could deny me my freedom, because a parole board requires you to say you're guilty and to express remorse before they let you out. How could I do that? And yet it was against this backdrop that I said no. I'll take my chances because I believe that my faith in God is sufficient, as I prayed and I cried with my wife on that trailer visit, that we would make it. In addition to that, we had kept the stork flying. Fernando Bermudez III was born in 2005. And for me, he symbolized my determination to live beyond prison. and to, yes, allow something great to escape even if I didn't. But I took my chances, and I go before the judge, and all the witnesses come forward, and they too reveal the reasons again why they lied. And I couldn't believe it, because here we go again. Here we go again. But this time, the detective who had arrested me and who had been arrested and was also responsible for now the exoneration of another innocent man, another Latino male, just months separately from when I was first arrested, and who had been arrested for drugs and crashing his car and hitting 2 young ladies, and who somehow miraculously was still on the police force, tell me how that happens, came in. He came in drunk. He came in like stumbling. What was wrong with this officer? What was haunting this man as he was cross-examined and couldn't remember anything? What was wrong now with the prosecutor who before that had been so smug in federal court about his position about my case, and now all of a sudden is talking about, well, which wrongful conviction case are you saying that I was involved in sending an innocent man to prison? Oh, there's more? There's more wrongful conviction cases that you're involved in? The proceeding, at grave risk, however, went in my favor. Because a month later, I'm summoned to federal court, and I'm standing there, my knees shaking, a touch of global warming under my collar, because this is my fate now. After 18 and a half years, if I don't get this 11th appeal, I could die in prison. And the judge asked me to stand, and I'm standing with my knees shaking. My lawyers are just like bracing me. And he says, the people of the state of New York versus Fernando Bermudez defendant will now make its decision. And he said, I hereby declare you, Fernando Bermudez, actually innocent. And I started crying, and I was just there, listening to the overwhelming emotion in the court, which I didn't have to look back for, but felt. I was a free man. I was going to be free. And the judge said that the prosecutor knew and should have known that he was relying upon perjured testimony, that this prosecutor had purposely sent me to prison, that the police department had employed illegal identification procedures. Duh. We've been saying this for years in court, which another judge had already acknowledged, but didn't free me. And that the state of New York, for the first time, had admitted that his star witness, Efren Pinocchio Lopez, was lying. They admitted this. And he declared me innocent, apologized to me, and that began my freedom. I walked out into a new world which had changed over 18 years. I had been through several presidents, governors. The technology had drastically changed. The cell phones, which were the size of shoe boxes, were now so small in your hand. Fashion had changed. 1990, 91, baggy pants were in. Now it was skinny jeans. And I caught one, tried to put it on, got it up one leg, got it up the other, and I couldn't get it up my Dominican butt. So I caught a complex. And I tried to put it up, but I felt like a ballet dancer in tights. And one dude said, that's the style. I said, no, it's not. I feel like leotards. Then I got the right size and I started getting with it. I started realizing that instead of me dancing old school, doing the robot and all this other stuff, which can still be in style if you do it right, that I needed to get my Magic Mike moves on. I needed to dance. I needed to learn how to reintegrate into society. That I needed to learn how to become a human being again as I ran in a park in freedom. And I started feeling alive again. But there was a problem. There was a problem. I didn't come out of prison the same person I was. I came out of prison and my parents didn't even recognize me. My mother said, mi hijo, ¿qué te pasó? Tú eres diferente ahora. You don't even want to even speak to us. You don't even want to come by. Well, I couldn't come back to the same neighborhood where I was arrested in, and I was living in Connecticut. And I was trying to be a responsible father to my children, to give them the dad that they were missing. And they didn't understand that. They didn't understand that I was waking up in the middle of the night, sweating, that I felt anxious around people in a department store, that I had got dizzy in a department store because all the colors and selections were overwhelming me, that I had gotten up throughout the middle of the night on many occasions and I was walking because I still felt like I was in a prison cell, a 6x9-foot cell, only for my wife to tell me, go back to bed, you're not in prison anymore. There's no more standing count for you. Well, in my mind there was. In my mind I was free, and yet I still felt like I was in prison. I still felt like I didn't have permission to carry money. I would catch a complex when I swiped the debit card and it wouldn't register, and I felt like I was being looked at as a thief. I was embarrassed. And I was hurt because the police and prosecutor were fighting me still. Not because I hadn't won my case, but because they offered nothing. The state of New York had kicked me out with nothing. After 18 and a half years, I was released out of prison with no money, no psychological counseling, and I had to get all of this on my own. 18 and a half years of prison. There is no pencil that can erase that damage, let me tell you. And I realized that I needed psychological counseling because I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, because my heart would beat fast, because I felt like I didn't belong in society. And so I started getting that. And at the same time, I started going to college, and I earned my bachelor's degree. Then I continued trying to educate myself as well. And equally important, I started sharing my story as a form of employment. I started devising a way to support myself in that if I couldn't find a job, then I needed to tell my story. And I started cold calling universities. I started dialing and telling my story on the phone. And some people were receptive. I would show them newspaper clips. I would send it to them by way of email, links, because I learned how to do links and all this stuff now, because the internet had not existed, and now all of a sudden we got this internet. And I didn't understand when the screen would say fatal error detected. I was like, what does that mean? I mean, all these different technological things, and everyone's texting, all these texting, OMG, LOL, and people talking to themselves, and I realized it's Bluetooth technology. You know, it was a world that just confused me and took me by surprise. And I started writing, and next thing I know, I'm getting these lectures. And I even cold called Gene Murley. And that way we met and we got to talk. And I've been here several times since. It is the story not only of forgiveness that is essential with what you go through and what I went through and how I had to put that aside, but also the story of determination and perseverance that strikes at the heart that whatever adversity we face as human beings, that we have to also fight for to get our rights as human beings. And that's what I do. I'm an advocate with my children. It's not just me, it's myself and my children and my wife who we travel the world and nationally to share our stories. To end the death penalty because we know that up to 147 or more people have been released from death row who were innocent. What pencil can erase that? Because once you're dead, it's over. We advocate to change the laws up in Albany with the politicians up there so that they can change the laws to prevent things like forcing people to sit down, to hide their height and weight difference, so that witnesses, if a suspect stands, can make a better identification. We're working to change that. We're working to hold corrupt police and prosecutors accountable, because what happened to me and the over 1,700 documented wrongful conviction cases since 1989, and those that have not been documented before, and those who are estimated to still be wrongfully incarcerated in the 1.1 to 5% range out of the 2.3 million people we got incarcerated, presents a human rights and social justice problem that needs to be addressed. So I find no better way to live than through the action of what happened to me and preventing it from someone else. And we also fight to get appropriate and any compensation for those who've been wrongfully convicted. Because you would think that upon getting out, with New York State having compensation laws, that is, giving people some monetary help to help get their lives together, that even though it's in the legislation, that it would be that simple. But it's not. It's not. I had to fight for 5.5 years before I got my compensation. And the state fought me at every turn. At every turn, they fought me and forced me to relive my case all over again. That is, I was being interrogated for up to 10 hours, the way I was in a police precinct, where they wanted to know everything from my childhood to my adulthood, just to see how they would not pay me for the 18.5 years I've been through hell. Which is why we seek to hold corrupt police and prosecutors accountable. Their stories today, like Stephen Avery's The Making of a Murderer, that make more people aware of this wrongful conviction problem. Jennifer Thompson's book, Picking Cotton, demonstrates the danger of mistaken eyewitness identification and all the host of problems that it can create. But the damage that wrongful convictions cause is not so simple as just giving a person a check and compensating them. It's not so simple as allowing this person to just be free again and to get on with their lives. The police and prosecutors, those who purposely send innocent people to prison, must be held accountable. They have an ethical responsibility to uphold the law and to make sure that no innocent person should suffer. When they don't do that, they erode the public trust and confidence that we as citizens have to protect us from this happening again, to one of us, to one of your children, to one of your relatives. What it does to every human being to be wrongfully incarcerated is that it can kill you inside in certain ways. You live with an anxiety of knowing what happened to you, that no matter what, you just can't shake off. My friend Darrell Hunt just died. He did 19 years in prison. He just died, man. I was in North Carolina, and I was at the Healing Justice Center, which Jennifer Thompson created, who wrote the book, Picking Cotton, involved. And we were waiting for Darrell Hunt. One of the reasons I moved to North Carolina is because I wanted to work with Darrell Hunt. And I wanted to work on the criminal justice reform there and everywhere else. And he had cancer. And he had been so stressed out over what happened to him. And we were at the retreat. And we got news that Daryl Hunt, who was supposed to be there, was found in a car dead near Wake Forest University, and there stood his empty seat. Now we knew when my friend Daryl Hunt, the first exoneree who took me out to lunch when I was just free for a couple of months, why he didn't show up and why we can't work together. There have been over 10 exonerees in the last few years who have died. Heart attacks. Strokes. Suicide, man. Because it's hard to live with what happened to you. It's not about just so easy getting back with your life, man. They do damage to you, man. No pencil can erase. And people take advantage of you when you're innocent. You deal with people in the world, they know you're innocent, they think that you're gullible and you can be taken advantage of. But I'm determined that I'm going to continue living my life out loud, that I'm going to pick up and work through Daryl Hunt's legacy to help him, because I'm not the only one. We have to stand together, and we have to fight. Not just here, but globally. The book, Picking Cotton, speaks about forgiveness, redemption, and the opportunity to use that story as one agent of change. I want to be that agent. I'm going to continue devoting my life. Right now, I am developing a real estate development project, which from North Carolina will become the Fernando Bermudez Innocent Scholarship Fund. And this fund, through the profits received through the real estate development that I'm involved in, and I'm learning more and more about, will provide a scholarship to students who win an award-winning essay, and they will receive X amount of money, and their mission will be to volunteer their life in some way for a certain amount of time to an innocence project or some wrongful conviction cause. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and I'm gonna put my experiences where they need to be, because whether it's you or anyone else in this audience, we want to fight together with you against this problem of wrongful convictions. I see no better way to live. And it's the legacy that I'm creating for my children to carry over as they travel with us and have been affected too. My daughter Carissa, 14, she's distracted now with all the different technology and all the different things that happen. But let me tell you, she's a lawyer at heart, and that's what she wants to do. My son Fernando, 10 years old now, has been affected by this situation. I'm not embarrassed to say that to this day, because he's so concerned that if I leave him too long, I might go to prison, that he still sleeps with us. I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm just concerned that if he doesn't stop, he'll have a mustache. And my eldest daughter, Shayla, 23, just gave us our second grandson. So I'm a grandfather twice now. And all of us, our family, will continue fighting. Because what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. And I encourage you that whenever you're in the darkness, the boredom, the frustration of your studies, when life tells you that you can't, let me tell you that you could. Let me tell you that you can rise above your circumstances and get that perspective as I did. And see the problem for what it is. Something smaller, but not greater and bigger than yourself. Be good to yourself when you make mistakes. Learn from them, because I've made mistakes upon my release as well. I just got cheated by a corrupt contractor, but I'm gonna take him to court. And that fight is not over. And the fight is not over against wrongful convictions. So I ask you today, Queensborough Community College, to evaluate Picking Cotton beyond it just being a good read. To evaluate what forgiveness means in life, what mistaken eyewitness identifications mean for our criminal justice system as the leading cause, and what you, after reading and hearing my story today, can do to become an agent of change. If I have no excuse, why should you? Thank you.
Well, the question is, what are major issues or themes you had to go through that can help me inspire new characters and chapters for a book involving someone who was also not, although wrongfully convicted, that is in prison though?
Okay. Yeah, because it's the structure of a book, like it's the skeleton of a book where you have to fill in the... Yeah, I mean, certainly you always have your protagonist and antagonist, and regardless of the background, guilt or innocence, there's always, I would think, the hope that there's a level of redemption in that character development's life. Sometimes, and really, it doesn't matter what you have done, it matters what you become as a result of that. There's no excuse, really, for horrendous crimes that have happened and things like that. You can't take back that damage. It's horrible, but how do you redeem yourself? What do you do when that circumstance is part of your life or you were responsible for it? What were the elements that helped you connect to what becomes your story? Was it faith? Was it personal disgust? Was it your love for your own children and now you see through their eyes and empathize the type of damage you've done when perhaps you were too blinded or drug-induced, or any other reason that put you in that position in the first place? You have to have elements that acquire the character development of that particular person.
You have another question?
Recently, on the news, they've been talking about shutting down Rikers Island, right? Being that you've been there and you've seen firsthand the brutality and everything that goes on, do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with shutting it down. The problem is, where are you going to put everybody? And the thing is, what you really need is that you need a revamping or reform of that correctional department. I've been in there, 91, 92 I was there, and then I was there for my court proceedings where I was there a few weeks. And it's like the same old, except the gangs change, but yet the disposition, for anger and violence, et cetera, is still there. So is the correctional officer brutality. What do? You have to have a deterrent effect. Laws are created in our society to provide a push against repeating this sort of behavior again. If there's no consequences or accountability, just like wrongful convictions, then it can happen again. Those who are responsible for not upholding the law, even in a correctional setting, need to be held responsible. And recently that is starting to happen, which is why, as you said, they are calling for reforms and the closing of Rikers. I think people need to be held financially and socially liable for this type of destruction, because people have died in Rikers Island and they haven't even been convicted of a crime. What if for some reason you end up in Rikers Island, say you caught with some pot or something? Pot smokers, that's a whole nother subject, medical marijuana in Colorado and what they do, that's a whole nother subject. But what if you're caught? You get sent, you go to central booking, and then you don't post bail and you get sent to Rikers Island. Just for something like that, you could end up now killed because you're at Rikers Island. So, it's so important to provide a safe atmosphere for every person who's arrested and to give them the opportunity to also change their lives.
Do you feel that there should be like a separation in there? Because I know there's low-level criminals as well as those that committed felonies. They're all put into one area. Yes,
absolutely, because you have people for drug crimes and then you have people who are convicted of serial murders, etc. And now you have all these people grouped together. The mindset of different people facing different time in itself can create a combustion, which when it explodes can lead to dire consequences. So yeah, I think there should be a separation.
Thank you.
You spoke about forgiving Efren Lopez for his wrongful testimony, if you will. Do you think your thought process would have changed if he did not show any remorse for his actions?
I think it would have changed after I got out then. I think it would have changed then because I was dealing with the problem of holding so much anger and stuff, but when he did that, it broke me in a level that I wasn't expecting because I had been trying to forgive him and all the witnesses who put me in prison. Because I was on a Christian walk in which I was reading about forgiveness, I was learning about forgiveness, and I wanted to carry that out, but I was having trouble doing it. He did that, when he said that to me, he helped create a change in me right then and there because it's what I wanted to do. And if he was man enough to do that in open court the way he did, then I had to search my own self for what I could do as a result.
I wanted to know how was it meeting Jennifer Thompson and Ronald Cotton? Like, what words did you exchange, and since you had similar experiences?
Yes, well, I met Jennifer and Ronald Cotton years ago. We do innocence movement work, so we travel nationally and we meet at different events. And once I moved to North Carolina, then I met her more personally because that's where she lives. So, we was able to be sociable, her and her husband. Her husband got me a talk at his university. And then she said, I want you to be part of the Healing Justice Foundation. You're an exoneree, and we could use your consultation. But just as important, she invited me to the Healing Justice Retreat, the first of its kind, in which just last week, just a few days ago, Sunday, the day that we heard the bad news about Darrell Hunt, actually, that he was found dead, we were all together, and it was several exonerees. Ohio man who spent time in prison for a crime he didn't commit. One from DC who had gotten out through the parole board but never had been exonerated and is working on it. Another one who was from Virginia, and like two others, including a female who had been released from death row and who was declared innocent. In addition to crime victim families who were there and dealing with their own suffering. And it was great. It was great connecting her on this level because it's a program that is going to help people who have trauma to help understand it and start working on trying to heal from it through a group support system in which we even had a licensed therapist there because some people would break out and would have to leave the room with uncontrolled emotion because reliving some of this stuff is not easy. So it was a great opportunity and we're going to do more work together. This is just the beginning. In fact, I was just with Darrell Hunt and Jennifer Thompson in Washington, D.C., where we were working with the Attorney General there and other people so we can bring the reforms that we need to our criminal justice system, including states that give no compensation to those who they've wronged. I'm gonna say that again. Some states give no compensation to those who've been wrongfully incarcerated. And that's a shame. Yes?
I think you were talking loud enough. So Ronald was able to connect with Jennifer. Were you able to connect with anybody after you were, exonerated? For anybody who's accused you? Were you able to talk to anybody?
No, due to my ongoing cases, I cannot converse or have any contact with them. But I do know Ronald Cotton. Ronald Cotton is a nice man. I haven't met him in North Carolina itself. I think he still lives there, but he had a stroke 2 years ago. So he had dropped out. When I saw him, he was in bad shape, and I just hope that he's in better health. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, I would like to know your thoughts on the Central Park 5 case, and since that relates to wrongful, like faulty eyewitness testimony, what are your thoughts about that, the Central Park 5 case?
Yes, well, their case didn't, I know them personally, and we've worked together in some instances, and it's a good documentary that they came out with, which has ignited the public imagination and public knowledge about this wrongful conviction problem. And the long battle that they had to be compensated. I mean, it took them over 10 years to be compensated. And not only that, the damage that happened in their lives as young men. These young men were in their teens when this happened too. And then it also speaks to the gravity and considerations that we should all have to the political candidates that we have at the fore in our political race for presidency. Well, for example, Donald Trump. You know what he's doing. You know how he's thumping. Let's take it back. In 1989, when this case first happened, when New York City was a hotbed of crime in which from 1989 up until 1993, there was over 2,000 homicides in New York City each year. That's the context in which I was arrested in as well. But Donald Trump at that time put a big billboard condemning the Central Park Five and essentially calling for their execution. Well, was he right? No. Right? These men were proven innocent. So what does it mean for someone to have that sort of judgment and then to be elected president? What kind of rush to judgment may he have if we get into a conflict with another country? What misjudgment, what misfiring may he have in his political ammunition and strength? What does it mean for our country if he did such a grave mistake then? And to this day, speaking about redemption, forgiveness, and so forth, he has not even apologized to them. So that's how the Central Park case strikes me the most, besides knowing the men personally and how they suffer still, and what does it mean, for the imagination and public discussion we need on this.
Thank you.
Hi. I think that both you and I can agree that prisons, as they are now, are in a dismal condition. Besides exonerations, what would be the reforms that you would like to see, not just in the law, but in prison life and mentality?
Well, the kind of prison reforms that I would like to see is certainly to expand the prison education programs. I was a beneficiary of the prison, the Tap and Pell grants when they existed before they were taken away in 1995. And I was able to get an associate's degree, and just that alone, from that experience from 1995 until I would get more private education in 2008 through another prison scholarship program, I've seen the transformation in human lives inside prison in remarkable ways, guilty and innocent. I'm talking about men who have to date gone on and earned their doctorate's degree as a result of getting that foundation of education in prison. I'm talking about statistical, empirical evidence which shows that those who get a college education in prison are less likely to return to prison because they've prepared themselves educationally with a different attitude and marketable skills, which in large part allow them to become leaders and become marketable out in the real employment place. So education in prison is something that I feel that needs to be refunded in greater ways. It's something that would help improve the lives of society, because these men and women who get these college educations in prison come out and become taxpayers. They become more productive. They become better family-orientated individuals. And they just overall have a better chance of success. That's my first reform. And of course, nipping problems such as drug and substance abuse, because a lot of people are in prison as well in what I call a land of bad decisions, because let's face it, people make bad decisions, and in some instances, they end up in prison. But some of that is based upon drug and substance abuse, and if you don't address those problems while in prison, then you're gonna come out, you're still gonna be an addict, then what's gonna happen? You're gonna end up in prison. So those two things, education and the drug and substance abuse funding, should be part of the funding. You're welcome. Yes?
What happens to Lulu? Where is he now?
Lulu is still free. He's living his life, I would say, still thumbing his nose at justice, even though the judge said in his decision that the police and prosecutor by all means know who actually committed this crime. And to this day, they haven't done anything. The way I look at it, this case is a cold case in that it's never been solved. If a case hasn't been solved, by definition, then it becomes a cold case. And that means that there's still a murderer out there walking around, and this person is capable of committing more crimes, and this person should be arrested. And it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. It's a disgrace that this person has been allowed to be free.
You said that one of your lawyers had cancer.
Yes.
How is she, and was she there to see when you was pronounced innocent?
Yes. Well, Marianne, who is my spiritual mother, who nurtured me in so many ways throughout my incarceration, coming to visit me, offered me an opportunity to write her letters and call her, and all the fighting that she did. She had gone through several bouts of cancer, which went in remission, and then finally last year she died. She died. She couldn't take the fight anymore, and she died of cancer. And I was there with her right before she died. And it's interesting because she always had hoped the best for me, and she wants me to go to law school, and it's something that, when you have kids, it's hard to do, but I'm not putting anything out of the ordinary still. When I fought to get my house in North Carolina, the real estate agent said that he didn't think I would get the asking price. And I did all my homework, and I shot the best price that I could, and Marianne said that I could do it. Well, when I came back from making my last offer, and I was on my way back to Connecticut, we got the news that Marianne had died. And seconds later, I kid you not, our real estate agent called and says, "You got the house on the hill. We don't know how you did it. Someone's looking over you." And I just thought of Marianne, because he didn't think we could get that price.
I've read a statement saying unforgiveness is the poison that you drink, waiting for the other person to die. What advice would you give someone who's struggling with unforgiveness? And do you think that the reason why you could have moved forward is because of your faith in God, Jesus Christ?
Yes, of course. I mean, I deal with a lot of stuff in my head. Sometimes I feel like I'm trapped in my own house, still dealing with things. And forgiveness is something that I had to deal with, and even that I still have to. Whenever I get angry at the people, because see, this is the context. To this day, the prosecutor has been let off the hook. So I want you to just understand how, even though I've forgiven those teenagers who put me in prison, and even though I've sought to forgive the prosecutor, he's never gotten punished for what happened. He's not have been accountable. Not even the courts have held accountable. The only people that the courts are holding accountable to this day is the police department. What was the prosecutor who had every opportunity to stop this case from going forward? However, I know that I have to seek forgiveness from others and give it myself as well, because I can't live with that anger and bitterness and grudge inside me. It makes you miserable. You can't progress. I can't be a father to my kids being an angry dude. You just can't. You don't have that innocence that you need for children by being so angry and having a grudge. So I had to forgive. Anger, it can make you physically sick through the grudge that you hold through unforgiveness. There's a physiological process that actually occurs. You get this adrenaline pumping in you. You get this cortisol, these bad hormones that really deteriorate your health. And so I don't want part of that. And so I just strive to forgive. I pray for my enemies, and I still run to exhaustion when I need to. Yes?
What was your hardest adjustment when you came home? Like in Picking Cotton, we read that he was almost kind of afraid to be in groups and wanted always an alibi, like he had to be with people. Is that something that you have also struggled with?
Absolutely. I've even coined the term for myself, which I call alibi explanation. It's a more academic term in my writings. And for me, one of the problems that I have is that I may over-explain things too much, and I'll give details about things, and then I'll even reference it. Like I said, if you don't believe me, act such and such, or act such and such. And I realize now, in self-evaluating myself, that it's because I told the truth in the precinct, and for so long that I wasn't believed, that now it almost feels like I have to have an alibi. I have to have support just in case I'm not believed, even though I know I'm telling the truth. And it's something like where if I'm eating gum, you're not gonna see me dumping a piece of gum on the sidewalk. That gum is going inside right here. We're gonna flush it in the toilet because nobody's gonna get my DNA, you know? Or I'm gonna go to an ATM and take some money out on purpose or just play with it so I can get a receipt. That way, that receipt shows me in the camera and I have a receipt as well. It shows me in the camera and it shows me, so someone try to say I did something in another state. Well, I'm in North Carolina in Walmart, mind you, trying to get spray cans for my graffiti art, which is the other thing I'm doing for therapy. I do graffiti art. So I got my token, New York City subway token, for real.
You built a family in prison. How did you meet your wife and realize you loved her?
Well, this is the, my man, the romancer. Yeah. Listen. This tells you the dangers of watching television. My wife, it was a national story. My wife was living in Oklahoma and she saw me on TV and she wrote me letters. She investigated and found me. Next thing I know, I get this letter and she wants to come visit me. And she came to visit me and we fell in love. And then we got married in the early beginning of my incarceration. And I knew she was the one because out of all the other females I had coming to visit me when I was first locked up, she brought God into the picture. Other girls was talking about, when you get out, we're gonna do this. She brought God. Cause I was going back and forth. Yeah, praise God. Let me tell you, she brought it real. She brought the proverbial Proverbs 31 woman to the fore. You know, if you ever read the Bible, Proverbs 31, just read that. She brought that to my life. And then she brought these babies. You know what I mean? She brought, look, oh, man. Look at my first daughter right there, right above me, Shayla, married to her Brazilian husband. She left college because listen, I came home, let me tell you real quick. I came home, she didn't know me anymore. She got scared. I was in my room, I was in my son's room, I was going through stuff. She didn't think I loved her, so she dropped out of college and got in love with her high school sweetheart. They were the prom people, you know? And she got married to him. They produced, right there, little Noah, the little kid next to my son, who's next to my wife. So he came in, and then he already had a baby, his daughter right there. So that's her stepdaughter, and then my daughter Carissa next to me right there on the other side to the far right. Is my daughter Carissa, and then my grandson, my second grandson was born, Gianno Robert King. And so she brought me this into my life. I'm one of the few privileged exonerees who was able to have a family in prison. And it's because I believe that our Creator gave us the spaces between our hands so we could hold the hand of another in life. And so we could support each other. And so we could pull each other up when we're down. That's my family right there. And that's my son, who if he don't stop sleeping with us, he's gonna have the mustache. Right there with the white and black shirt.
Other questions?
When you get released, what was the first struggle that you faced? And when journalists interviewed you, what was your first reaction?
Well, I was bewildered in just getting out. I mean, it had been a struggle in which I felt part of the institutional furniture. You live in prison so long that you become accustomed to that. Not because you want to, but because it feels like that's it. You're in there, you don't feel like you're gonna get out. And so it became something where with reporters, I just expressed my happiness in getting out and what my plans were. And then I also made it clear in the public that I wanted to start getting speaking engagements because I needed to find employment. And some of that helped. And it helped me as well because let me tell you how it helped, through journalism. I got a fundraiser. I get out of prison, right? And I got a fundraiser. I need money. I got no money. So I got this fundraiser on Long Island with these Irish guys. Come on, say, Patty, come over here. We having a fundraiser for you, sir. We have some fun here. And so I get there, we have fun. Listen, Miguel Cotto, the boxing champ, signed some gloves. Leon Spink signed some gloves for me. I had all pieces of Yankee Stadium were donated. I had tickets to the Hard Rock Cafe. All these different places donated stuff because they heard about my story. And, you know, it helped. But now I need a car because I need to get to place. I need to get to college. I'm trying to finish my bachelor's degree. And so I go to a dealership, and I go in there, and they say, you got no credit. Where you've been? Who are you? You got no credit. We just can't give you a car. So I told them, I said, but I got a story. So I took out the newspaper clippings, and I started showing. Next thing I know, I'm having like an audience in the car dealership, and they gave me the car. I had to pay, yeah. I got a Nissan. I mean, I had to put a down payment, but they gave me this low interest, and they gave me some credits, and they threw in some extras. That's how the news helped me, because I was able to show them the paperwork.
When you are in prison and you think you're going to be there for the rest of your life, how do you deal with, like, understandably not even other people, but to know you'll never feel grass on your feet again or dive into the ocean? How did you deal with things like that?
Reading. I read countless books in which, as Emily Dickinson would say, a book is a frigate which helps take you to lands undiscovered. And I would read books, and I would have this little map in which I would barnacle it with all these little places that I would read about. And I would write little fun facts, like cork was discovered in the Mediterranean. This is the highest mountain in Japan, Mount Fuji. All these different little notes, and I would read and I would imagine going to these places. And it kept me going as a human being, because I said one day I could travel to these places, you know, if I get out of prison. And so it would help my imagination, in which I would read about these places and concepts and ideas and battles, inspirational stories of people who overcome odds, people trapped in icebergs. If you read The Endurance, whether Ernest and Shackleton, you know, they had it tough. They were stuck out there, you know, eating dog food, you know? I mean, dogs as the food. And so, you know, you learn to get inspiration through literature, and that's what happened to me. And so when I got out, I'm gonna tell you how it connects also. When I got out, sure enough, I started learning different languages, and I started trying to get to these places, and to this day, I've had lecture tours throughout Japan, France, Italy, Germany. I've been to Sweden, been to Canada, you know, traveling, because I imagined this stuff in prison. And I learned the culture, so when I got there, I was able to connect it with the audience. So if the Japanese tell me something, I'll be like, arigato gozaimasu, thank you very much. And they love that, because you're connecting with their culture, and that's what literature did for me.
Any other questions? Yes.
How did you converse with the other cellmates in like Rikers and in the upstate prison you were sent to? Like, did you have any issues with them, or did you ever like try to tell them I am innocent, or any?
You were kind of low even.
Oh, how did you converse with the other cellmates from Rikers and when you went to upstate Albany prison and things like that?
Well, sometimes very carefully, because people can have delusions in prison. So you got to be careful how you speak to people, because they could just, the slightest thing can be taken. Are you trying to disrespect me? You know, so you have mental problems. That's one of the problems with the mass incarceration problem that we have with over 2.3 million people. Some of the mental asylums have been downsized, and they cause people to become to prison. So how I talk to them really at every level is with respect. I try to be respectful to everybody, and I just try to mind my business. And if someone catches a delusion, I try to sort of like, kind of like moonwalk it backward, you know? Because I don't want no trouble with Big Bubba who weighs 400 pounds. When I sold clothes in prison, if you sell a clothing, I sell a clothes to Big Bubba who weigh 300-something pounds. Now, Big Bubba, how about Big Bubba? What if he don't want to pay you? You gotta be careful, Big Bubba. You can't tell him, yo, you gotta pay me, man. You're behind paying me. Where's my cigarettes? Big Bubba's gonna get pissed. So you gotta learn how to talk to Big Bubba or anyone else. And so you have ways of learning how to communicate. Like I would tell Big Bubba, I said, listen, I'm gonna sell you this 5 extra large shirt. I know you pumping iron every day, and I know you wanna see your girlfriend you met by way of a pen pal, but I don't trust Big Bubba. So Big Bubba, I'm gonna say, why don't you let me hold your cassette tapes? All those R&B cassette tapes you got, let me just hold them, and when you pay me, I'll give you your cassette tapes. We'll do a layaway plan, you know? So you have to reason with people sometimes, because if I don't reason with Big Bubba, then Big Bubba may try to crush me. Me and him gonna tussle.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks everybody. Please join me in thanking Fernando.